In today's episode, we discuss part 3 of When the Night Comes Falling by Howard Bloom. Why was the 911 dispatcher blamed at first? Who was the 911 caller? Did crucial responders show up to the scene too late? And who did Ellie investigate and clear? We are discussing these questions as we summarize part 3. As always, everything we discuss is for entertainment and is speculation. Please like and subscribe, and definitely join our discussion in the comments. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello. So this is the third installment of Howard Bloom's book, When the Night Comes
Falling.
Because I always want to call it
Calling.
And this part is...
So this part 3 is called The Hunter's Story.
The Hunter's Story, yes. I have to say, the first 2 parts were okay. I know this is a novel and he's writing for effect and stuff like that. But for me, I was looking for some nuggets in the book that, we could speak on, or things that I wasn't fully aware of. There was a couple in the first 2 parts, things that we could talk about, which was good, but nothing that really, I hadn't heard that before. And in this part, I think I got hit with a couple of those. So I'm very interested to get your take on some of them and discuss this part. So why don't you kick us off there, Kimberly?
Okay, so The Hunter's Story, I took it as double meanings with hunting the killer, and it's about the police, and some of them are literal hunters.
Yes.
So.
And I didn't fall in love with that double entendre myself, but
that's the way I took it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, because they do talk of some.
He puts a lot of that in there.
Hunter stories, but I didn't fall in love with that. But go ahead.
Yeah. So this chapter 15 is mostly Sergeant. I believe he's a Sergeant Gunderson's perspective. So he's one of the first responders that show up to the scene, but they start off with the 911 call. But nobody knows about the 911 call, hasn't been released. But the author says that the dispatcher of the 911 call was blamed for not describing the call correctly, like at first, but then corrects it later and says she did do it correctly because the way that the 911 calls are routed in that town, like whatever you call in for, if you're not very specific, they'll just say it's an unconscious person and connect it through to wherever it needs to go just to get somebody there. And
that's a lot of the early speculation that we had heard even before. I mean, this is over a year ago. One of the first things that we heard was there was a 911 call about an unconscious person. Right. Not that there were 4 murders that happened, you know, because we had talked extensively, in previous episodes about why did it take so long, not only for the call, but for officers to arrive, and I think my point on that was, well, if you have an unconscious person, you may send EMTs first, police later. It wouldn't have sirens, bells, and whistles going off if it was routed correctly. But there's still a lot of speculation around that, and I have my own theories. But
that does raise questions because we're going to get into this, and a lot of people showed up to the scene late, in my opinion, and. I mean, I can understand that misunderstanding, like I said before, like in the first 30 minutes, but after you're there, it's going to be quite evident of what's going on. So the other thing that was interesting is that the speculation that took off right away on the online community about this was hearing that the call went in as an unconscious person. So right away, everybody assumes it was the roommates or the people who were there that are calling and saying, we only have an unconscious person here.
Right.
And then it got clarified later
supposedly clarified
that no, that's how these calls are routed. So there's still questions about that.
Right.
I'm sure we'll get feedback in the comments about if that's accurate or not, people that have really done some research on it. But, I've seen people like this poor dispatcher who's probably going to get blamed for this if it turns out that, it's more than that.
Yeah, there's nothing that could have been done at that point, unfortunately. So I don't know how much is really on them. But there was also another theory that the person that did call 911 was calling on, let's say, Dylan's behalf. And she was in so much shock that at one point she had fell over unconscious and
someone actually pass out outside?
Exactly.
And then that would explain why there was an unconscious person.
Right. So, I mean, again, we don't know the facts of any of that, but those were some of the speculations that were out there to bring it full circle.
Yep, for sure. So this Sergeant Gunderson gets the call, and then they describe him and his life, and that he's a very hands-on cop. Like, he wanted to get involved in the community, and he would do like hot dog barbecues with the kids. So the author really painted the picture of that, what type of person he was, what kind of police officer he was. Also said that, he gets this call, there's an unconscious person, or whatever information he got. He could have sent someone else, but he chose to go himself. And then it describes him showing up to the house and that there's no noise. Students are milling about outside. They seem shocked. So the author really painted that scene. Just hears the words dead. Goes in and smells the
blood.
Red stuff. Yeah, I've heard that described a lot. So that hit him at first. The author described that the first floor was empty, nothing was disturbed. Although there are some photos online of the kitchen, which is, the first floor would be downstairs with Bethany. So I was thinking the main floor where the sliding glass is, but no, they went in. If you go through in the front door, you're downstairs, which they call the first floor. So nothing disturbed there, but goes up to the main level, which is the second floor, and sees Xana and Ethan. Then goes upstairs and sees Maddie and Kaylee, says that Kaylee was worse. That gives a lot of cause for, was she the target? Talks about, was there one assailant or many assailants, just based on the scene. Says that Maddie's wounds looked precise, like precise wounds. I don't know. Remember that point about that? Does that strike you? Do you remember him talking about that?
No, I think one of the things they said that the intruder found everyone asleep. So if you're going to go for the kill stab, it's going to be precise. The second victim, who's maybe awakened, wouldn't be as precise.
Oh, that was his point with that. Okay. So Murphy, the dog's discovered last because he's in a room by himself. And after going through the whole scene, he calls his boss. So that was chapter 15. So then chapter 16, and so that was Gunderson's perspective. So we had said on the last episode, we're going to talk about law enforcement, because there are some issues with some law enforcement officers, but the one that does seem to have some issues with like Brady Giglio charges or things like that is not mentioned in this book, at least at this part, not mentioned. So the next officer, so I did look up Gunderson. I couldn't really find anything about him. So if you know, let us know in the comments. We'll make sure to mention it in the next episode. The next officer is Roger Lanier. And they described his career path as like he was lured to Moscow because he would get an increase in his rank. So he was working somewhere else and then decided to go there. He's the person that set up the perimeter and called the coroner and the Idaho State Police. So he called all them. He called the university. The university sent out a vandal alert at 3:07. And then he tried to get a hold of Chief Fry, so the chief. And he says he couldn't get a hold of him. Then the author goes on to talk about how Chief Fry had some issues in town with the Christ Church, and he was getting death messages about, because the whole thing he went through with COVID. And so there was a scandal in that town called Stickergate. Do you remember me talking to you about that?
I do.
So Stickergate was about COVID, and this is what got the chief and law enforcement and helped get them more in trouble with the church, because when COVID first hit, I guess law enforcement would go out when the church was assembling outside and would put dots, like sticker dots, on the ground. This is not where Stickergate comes from, and the people had to stand on their stickers, so they would get defiant, not stand exactly on their sticker. Well, law enforcement arrested some of them, and so it caused this friction between, the churchgoers and law enforcement. And then they ended up releasing them and dropping the charges, because actually there were certain groups like churches that were immune from that. So they got let go, but then the grandkids of Doug Wilson thought they'd be, teenagers that were going to get smart. And they made these stickers that looked like the Russia Moscow symbol with the iron hand, with the hammer, the hook and the whatever that is, and put them all over town. And so got in trouble for that. And yeah, so they called it Stickergate. I thought that was funny.
And I guess to bring that part back to the book, I think what he was referencing there was that Chief Fry?
Yes.
Was mandated by the city council and the mayor, I believe, to enforce COVID protocols.
Yes.
So because of that mandate, he was asked to do this, right? So he did this. Don't know if his heart was in it or not, but, hey,
right.
That's my job. That's what I have to do. I'm going to do it. They had kind of reached out a little bit as what seemed to him like a symbolic peace offering by sending him some cookies.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote a note or whatever, thanking them. And, and they're like, well, how you think this is over? It's not over. You arrested us, Stickergate, all this stuff. But I guess to bring it back to the book, that's why, I wanted to mention that. Because I don't know if it's a police conspiracy in that regard, because I think he was just doing what he was told to do.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And, I don't think he was looking for trouble or wanted any of that trouble in the town. But, hey, you got a job to do. You do the job,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. But it just paints the picture of how the church has some major issues.
For sure.
With the law enforcement and probably the government, too, in that town.
Go back a little bit. A couple of things. I wanted to mention something earlier that you had talked about. Yep. Go back about 3 points and just read those off again. I want to.
That Lanier was the one that set up the perimeter, called the coroner, state police, the university. The vandal alert went out.
The vandal alert. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. There's some extra information about that.
Yeah. No. So, you said it happened like at 3:07 or something like that. And I was just joking around with our daughter earlier today. And I said, because she went to Cleveland State, right down the road here. And she lived on campus. And I was like, I was just finishing or re-listening to that part. And I asked her, I said, how many vandal alerts did you get? Constantly,
because I got them as a parent. My phone was going off all the time.
She's like, I've got a few of them.
Yeah.
So it was, to think, they didn't have that where I was. They could have had it probably at Kent State where you were. They probably had some
Not
of
back
that.
in our day.
No, I mean, was it a phone call or anything? Or I mean, it certainly wasn't text messages or anything like that, but
We had a couple major issues. There were some major issues on my campus when I was there, and I don't know, radio.
Okay.
I don't even remember.
But it just a sign of the times,
Yeah.
right? Maybe because of technology, we're able to reach these students a lot quicker.
Yeah.
But their vandal alert, or however they called it, was shelter in place, right?
Yeah. So the cops arrive around noon. Took them 3 hours to send out it's a mass text message that goes out to all their students that said shelter in place.
Shelter in place. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So I don't know. I was just having a conversation with our daughter about it.
Right.
I just thought
Now, what's interesting is there are there's definitely one parent that spoke out on social media. She was featured in that documentary that they did on that one program. I can't remember what channel that was on. That said a lot of kids knew something had happened at 9:30 in the morning. So the university is not putting something out till 3 p.m., but a lot of college students, it seems, knew much, much, much earlier. I heard a student speak out about that too. Just some extra information. Let's see. So Fry is away. I think he was out of town on a fishing trip or something. He was 3 hours away. So he doesn't get back into town till 6 p.m. So this is 6 hours later. He was described as old school. Then this Lanier had just attended a seminar about serial killers. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was ironic, that's in the front of your mind now. He also called the FBI. The FBI sent a behavioral analysis unit. That's what they said. I wonder if that's who was in the office with them when they said they shared their space. When she
shared the space, so you bring that up, and I don't know if we're going to talk about it a little bit later because I thought it was later on, but one of the things I found interesting was Bloom, the author here, mentions that the FBI had a trailer set up outside of the police department in their parking lot.
Ooh.
And would only attend the meetings inside when they had the morning briefings. So I'm curious, that's kind of contradictory where, I think...
that was testified to.
I think Corporal Payne had mentioned that, hey, this guy was down, in an office 30 feet away, or was he in a trailer outside of, the actual office? That's probably semantics, 6 of this,
down
that doesn't
the way,
another,
yeah.
But I just
by.
found that interesting that they were actually outside of the police department in their own trailer, which, again, facts will have to bear out facts, but,
yeah. I read this a little bit longer ago, and you've refreshed yourself, which is helping us during the day because you say some things and I'm like, oh, I forgot that part. That's why I have notes. So when Fry shows up and sees the scene, he calls the psychologist that they have for cops. And
yes, that was profound.
Yeah, I thought this was a very serious point, the way the author described this, that when he's calling this psychologist, he's like, this isn't just for the new guys, this is for everybody.
That was the point that I took from that as well, is that hey, we got some new guys, why don't you come in, be available to them? And he's like, what, come to think of it, you may need to be here for all of us,
we need you for everybody.
This is pretty graphic and grotesque. So
mm-hmm. And then what was first reported was that there was no ongoing threat. This was a targeted attack. So yes. That's exactly what Bloom says in the book. But he goes on to describe that Fry wasn't sure of that.
Right.
So could just be his liberties doing that.
Could have been his liberties, and it also and we speculated on Fry's liberties as well, right? In making that initial statement was, we want to put the community at ease. We want to make sure people don't turn this into a ghost town. I think he was thinking of too much. He was trying to managed too much in that moment. And I think when he finally got a half a step away from it and had clarity, almost like, and I almost liken it to what we just talked about, where in some instances he had immediate clarity, like, hey, I need a psychologist to come in and talk to our newbies.
Right.
Wait a minute. I need a psychologist to come in and talk to all of us.
Everybody.
I think when he started stepping away from things and looking at the big picture, he's like, okay, wait a minute. We don't know if this was a targeted attack. We don't know if this person would do or not do this again. For the greater good, let's be safe and let's ultimately do the right thing. In some cases, good on him that he's willing to correct himself, but bad on him that he didn't think through it enough in the moment to say, if I'm going to put something out there,
that's what,
let me make sure that it's the right thing to put out there the first time. I can't be doubling back every other day on something, and there was a lot of that in this.
A lot. And this is one of the things that started all the speculation, because how can you change your mind on that? Like, your first reaction's probably the true one, right? And they probably walked through that house and whatever they saw made them think this is a targeted attack.
That's what Bloom said, is that when the officers left that, they were like, this was targeted.
Yeah.
Like he is saying in his book, whether it's true or not, he's saying in this book that they left that saying this was targeted. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you can surmise that by looking at 4 dead bodies, but that's what he said.
I think that's the one point that most people in the community can agree on. It's just, how was it targeted?
Mm-hmm.
How was the targeting, and who was the target, and all of that. So after that, we stop agreeing.
Fair enough.
Everybody's got their own ideas and evidence for different things. Okay, so chapter 17 starts off with, now the officers are day in, day out working on this case, right? And they start at 7 a.m. every day, and they have the murder board up on the wall. And this talks about Brett Payne.
Yes.
Who was put in charge of this investigation, even though he was only at this force for a few years.
Yes.
So very little experience, and he's put in charge of this.
Do you remember why? How Bloom described why?
No, go ahead.
So it's part of this hunter's story. So this is where I thought, well, this is kind of a reach, but Payne came in to this unit via one of the wars. I can't remember exactly which one. My memory may fail me, but I want to say Iraq.
Military, yeah.
Came in, also did work with, I believe, the military police or some type of...
think so.
Some type of police force before this one, and had dealt with a lot of forensics. So he had, folks that were already there, probably didn't deal with the amount of forensics that Payne did in his previous employment before he came here. So he had dealt a lot with forensic, and Fry knew that this case would have a lot of forensics, and they even talk about how much they ended up pulling out of the house.
Yes.
There was some pretty high numbers. Yeah. So that, along with the hunter story, which I will let you listen for yourselves or read for yourselves, but he felt like he was steely enough and had enough past experience to lead this group on this investigation.
It did seem like he was, I don't know if enamored is the right word, but highly respectful of his military background, because Payne was only at this police department, I wrote it down, for 2 years.
Yeah.
So he came there 2 years earlier.
And the hunter story.
So so he described, so this is the author giving his literary
and they should almost read it for themselves, right? Because I don't know if we should give that because
I don't remember the details,
Oh, okay.
but what he did was just describe this dramatic killing
Yes.
of a wolf.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
just this dramatic killing of a wolf.
Yes.
And then 12 years later, this event, this crime happens.
Yes.
So, he's
steely is the word
the way the way he acted getting that wolf is the way he's going to go after this crime. That was what he did.
So I get the hunter's story about this, but it seemed to be a stretch.
Yeah.
I see
it
how
was dramatic.
Yeah, and I see how he's tying it together. So I understand, but I thought it was a good indication because there's been a lot of fodder out there about why Payne? He's only been there 2 years.
Yes, there has.
Why him? So Bloom, in a sense, is answering that question, why Payne?
Yes.
So I think the pro burger community can still come back and say, could have been this guy, should have been this guy, could have been the FBI, should have been anybody else but Payne, but explains why Payne.
He's given a reason in the book.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And Fry had also advanced him very quickly.
Yes.
Through
above
the ranks.
others who had been there.
Yes.
Yes.
Surpassed others.
Yes.
So this task force is put together. They're trying to understand why it happened, and they were using empirical, the evidence versus the theories.
Yeah.
That was their approach. So at first they came out and said this happened between 3 and 5 a.m.
Yes.
And actually, I think they were more specific and said 3 to 4, but then they narrowed it down to 4 a.m. to 4:20 a.m. Mm-hmm. There was no robbery, no SA,
Right.
and no trail of red stuff outside.
Right.
So then it gets into the evidence that they collected.
Yes.
So he says they collected lots of DNA,
Yes.
lots of hair,
Yes.
lots of saliva, red stuff, and fingerprints.
Yes.
They had 103 pieces of evidence. I didn't think that was a lot.
Keep going.
4,000 photos. They took 3D scans of the house.
Multiple times.
Said it was a single weapon. Mm-hmm. They found the knife sheath. Mm-hmm. Not on the first time. Mm-hmm. Looking in the room. They found it later. It's a widely available weapon, the way he described it.
Yes.
I've also heard that from one of our commenters from our last episode. So that's the evidence. Did you want to talk about the evidence?
No, just that's what on the initial walkthrough, right? The day that they rope things off, I think you had mentioned earlier, they call the coroner, they call the forensics team, they call all these people, and they probably spent a good amount of time in there grabbing, everything readily, immediately available to them. Let's get this, bag it, tag it, and take it to the precinct or whatever that needs to go, or the lab. It just seems like that for them not to be prepared for this. It seems like they pulled it together pretty quickly after they realized what they had on their hands and tried to gather enough stuff initially to get them going, to get them started.
So usually you say, let's back up, but I want to back up a little bit to the coroner.
Yes.
So she arrived too late, in my opinion, and that upsets me. But she got there at like 5 in the evening, I think, in the evening. What are your thoughts about that?
About the coroner bothers you about getting there late.
What do you think about the coroner getting there late?
I don't think it was late. I don't think there's a time that a coroner needs to be there by to do what they need to do.
So you don't think that impacts any evidence that could be seen by a coroner?
I mean, it gives you a better window of like time of death because of, certain things that happen with the body. Yeah, the sooner you discover, it's better. But no, the coroner isn't sitting in a police station waiting for a call to come in.
No, they're not.
But I want to hear what your concern is about the coroner being late, because maybe I'm not thinking of something that you are.
Well, I listened to her speak, and she said they don't show up right away because the police have to gather their evidence and do their thing. So I just feel like it's an elected position if you have the qualifications to do the things that they need to do. So like we talked about with work ethic and all of that, like I would want to get there because you're declaring the time of death and you want to see the condition of the bodies, and that just seems like timely information to me. It doesn't seem like there's anything helpful by waiting.
I don't think that, in my opinion, I don't know the coroner. I don't know the time that the coroner was called. I don't know where the coroner was at. I don't know if the coroner was 3 hours away with Fry. And actually beat him by an hour coming back. You don't know where this person was, right? But what I'm saying is, I think when the coroner gets the call, they're either going to dress up. If I'm in a bikini sitting by the pool, maybe indoor pool because it was wintertime, I'm not showing up that way. I'm going to.
I get that, but that doesn't take that many hours.
But we don't know what time the coroner was called. So we're immediately putting on her like, oh, it took you 4 hours to get there. Well, I got called 45 minutes before I arrived.
I told you I watched her interview and I think she got called earlier, but I don't want to beat that into the ground. But that was a thought that I had about her.
Yep.
Okay. So we talked about the evidence. So then they start talking about Dylan because he's like, there's an eyewitness.
Yes. This is good.
Great. We've got an eyewitness. But he described it as she comes with baggage.
Yes.
Because of her peeking out of her door 3 times. Just by baggage, I think he was implying suspicious activity. Did you take it that way?
No, but I see how you could take it that way because I think initially I was like, what does he mean by baggage? I thought a lot of things before he kind of continued on a little bit and started to describe to me what the definition of baggage was. But when he first said the word baggage, I had a litany of things that I was willing to put in that that little category over here. But after hearing that the whole way through, I think the baggage came from, as he later described, just shock and, not understanding and trying to process and being scared and a lot of other things that I thought could have been the opposite of, the people that I contacted are here. It's going down, the opposite of what
do you mean it's going down?
Like she's involved in some way, right? I've heard conspiracies that
because friends were there, people were there.
She could be involved in, wait a minute, they're here. Right? It's going down. I kind of want to see what's going on, but let me, hide away and stuff. And, okay, now I was told that I can't call anybody until, the Patsy's, 5 hours away. So I have to pretend like I go to sleep and wait, right? So baggage meant a bunch of different stuff to me, hearing some of the conspiracy theories with Dylan, than it did after when he kind of explained that her baggage would consist of maybe, by this author's account, fear, misunderstanding, not knowing what's going on, coming to a realization in the morning of what she feared really happened, so that was the descriptive of the baggage. But how do you say it?
Well, just the theories that you said and that not calling 911.
Yeah.
The actions she took for sure that's documented.
Yeah.
Looking out the door 3 times, never calling 911. Notifying her friends at 11.
Yeah.
And then someone, he does say, which I always thought nobody knew who called 911 in the book. And you and I were bantering about this earlier. So I said, Why would you hide the 911 caller? And you said,
he brings it up in the book.
and I forgot that part.
Well, I want to go back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
You said, yeah, Carlos, you refreshed your memory of this chapter a little bit earlier, which I did. I missed a couple because I think I fell asleep during part of the book. So I went back and made sure I copied it. But I can almost literally hear something once, and if prompted, I can regurgitate what was said.
Sometimes it's annoying.
Most of the time it's annoying.
Then other times I rely on it.
Yeah. So we say in this family, it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
When she needs to remember something, hey, I'm calling on your memory to tell me what this is. Or, if we have like an argument or a disagreement, and I said, well, honey, you said this. I never said that. And I'm like, hey, sometimes you rely on the memory, sometimes you don't. But in this case, I do remember, because it really stood out to me, that Hunter, do we want to talk about Hunter? Did we mention Hunter already? Okay.
Well, so he says in the book that Dylan calls Hunter Johnson, Ethan's golf buddy, to come over.
Yes.
He quickly takes a peek in the house, comes out. Immediately calls 911 is the way it's worded in the book.
Well, the way it's worded in the book, as I remember, is he goes in the house, immediately comes out, grabs Dylan's phone.
Yes.
And calls 911.
Yes.
And that's how I remember it in the book.
And I don't... Somehow that got leaked or something, or I don't know if it's in the PCA. I don't remember everything that's in there. But everybody pretty much agrees that it was her phone. Maybe I think they did say it in a press conference.
Oh, that it was
someone used her phone, but that's all he would say. He wouldn't say who called.
Okay.
And I was asking you, why would they not say who called?
Right. So I mean,
why?
But that was out there for a long time. I never knew that it was Hunter.
I don't think it's been said.
Yeah. So that was, a little piece of information that I didn't know.
So is he guessing, or does he know something we don't know, or he's assuming?
I think if you, because this narrative nonfiction states that, it has to be based on facts. You can add your dramatic, he aggressively took the phone from Dylan.
Right.
We don't know that, right? That's the narrative part of the nonfiction, but the nonfiction is he called 911.
Yeah.
Does that make sense the way I'm saying that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I would hope that those things, now people would say, how do you know that? And he doesn't give all his sources, so you can't verify it.
But in some places, though, which I found kind of odd, to be honest with you, now that you mentioned this real quick, in some places in the book, he says fact.
Oh, yes, he does.
Yes. Fact.
Yes.
So if the book is fact, then the beginning of the book should be fact, and let's tell the story. But he's really emphasizing fact because either it met a certain literary criteria, or because he's able to reveal those sources and be able to state the person's name or whatever. I don't know, but there are places in the book where he says fact.
Yes, he does.
And then a sentence. Okay, sorry
in
about
the
that.
Audio book.
In the audio book. Yeah, I'm assuming he's reading the audio book. He's not reading from a different manuscript, but it should be from the book, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then so this is where the literary fiction part comes in. He goes on about Sherlock Holmes and consulting detectives. And so he's trying to make an analogy of the approach that the officers are taking and how they're doing. I skipped past that.
You did not. You didn't like that? I actually like that.
I did not like that part.
Anytime you say something in layman's terms to me, if you put it in a relatable story that takes it from technical down to, hey, let me tell you a little story, and I could relate this easy to understand story with how things are done procedurally in the police department, I like that.
That's interesting to know. because
Why didn't you like it?
I'm like, get to the point.
Okay, all right.
I want to get to
so
the
you're
point.
just the facts, ma'am, right?
Yeah.
You're just the facts. Okay.
So he tells this story about Sherlock Holmes using a strategy where he consults other detectives to help him solve crimes. And so they're going to use that same approach and ask the public to help them. So then that's where they ask for tips and they open up the tip line.
Sorry they did that.
They got 20,000 tips.
Yes.
9,000 emails.
Right.
4,500 calls.
Yep.
6,000 digital
text messages,
images, email, whatever.
Yeah.
Not emails, because that was separate. Yep.
Yeah.
And then he talks about the true crime warriors that are on the internet and that they did have to vet out and investigate the people that were being speculated about online. So he mentions Hoodie Guy. So if you don't know who Hoodie Guy is, the girl, just briefly, the girls stopped at a food truck on their way home and they were accompanied by a college guy wearing a white hoodie. And it was suspicious when that video was first seen. And so everybody started calling him Hoodie Guy. And he was like suspect number one for a while for a lot of people.
Including you.
Including me.
So I remember the food truck video was one of the first videos released about this case. And people were analyzing the bejeebers.
Oh, I've seen every second of that.
of that video.
Truck, I know what everybody's ordered.
They clarified, they enhanced the sound so we could hear what he was saying. We were looking at body language and are they taking pictures and are they really, just looking behind them? I mean, that was so analyzed. And I remember at some point you're like, it's Hoodie Guy. It's Hoodie Guy. You can't convince me of anybody else. It's Hoodie Guy. And, but as we continue to get more, but to your point, and maybe part of Bloom's point here is there were a bunch of internet sleuths that were really pointing a crooked finger at a lot of people. Yeah. And a lot of it made sense. We talk all the time, if someone is murdered, who are the two people you look at immediately?
People who are with them last.
And?
The spouse.
There you go. So,
or the partner.
Yeah. So this made a lot of sense because it fit into...
He was the last one with them.
99% of what we've, seen on...
Yeah,
shows.
And for those of you that don't know, the first video of him was just them arriving at the truck, and so he was just kind of following them. He didn't order any food. He stood off to the back. He put his hood over he turned his hat around and put his hood up, like suspicious behavior. Then, like a month later or so, they probably to get everybody off his back, they released a video of him actually walking with them to the truck. So then it was like, okay. They're talking to him, he
was part of the entourage.
He's with them, but I don't know. There's still suspicions
let's keep
about
him.
Him.
Keep him on the list.
They'll say he's cleared, but I don't know. Yeah. We need to hear. I don't know why. So they mentioned Enon. I've brought him up before.
I never knew this guy's name, but I've heard a lot about him. But go ahead. Yeah.
To me, he's like this Spicoli character, just funny, aloof. He's come on some YouTube shows and actually spoke. He lived in an apartment next to where this happened. He was a cook. He talks about going over there one time with a bottle of cooking wine. It's just crazy like that. And there's a clip of him talking to a police officer, and he asks her if she wants to pet his cats. Like it's just funny. And he did get interviewed by the police though, and because he was a chef that got home, or a cook that got home late at night, and so he had heard some things and seen, I think, a black SUV or something outside. So,
but I think the community was looking at him because he was harassed a lot. He was, I mean, a lot of people were like, oh, he did it. He did it. He did it.
Yes.
And
People
he was
went after
like,
him. That's why he came out and spoke.
Yeah. And he's like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know?
He just came out and like,
Yeah.
it wasn't me.
Right.
He does juggle fire though.
There you
And probably machetes or something.
Well,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So talks about the frat boys. I don't remember exactly what he said about them, and we talked about them on another episode, on one of our previous episodes. So if you want to know more about that,
Yeah, but I think Bloom just
that
says,
out.
the Enon, the hoodie
these are
guy,
the people we had to look into.
and what? Clear.
Clear, yeah.
Clear.
Yeah.
So according to Howard Bloom in the book, police looked at these internet suspects and cleared them.
Yeah, and there was a big conspiracy on TikTok. A lawsuit came out of it because there was like a psychic on there, and this was early on in the case, that she was accusing like one of the professors.
Yeah.
And this person would not back down, and like as far as I knew, and I saw those videos when they came out, like real time, and was dumbfounded, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're making these accusations.
What's another saying? Well, I'll tell you another saying that we have in our house is, just because you say it with conviction
doesn't mean it's true.
Doesn't mean it's true. And this lady was apparently saying it like, I don't care what you say. This is what happened.
Oh,
right?
yeah. She was like, sue me. I'm right. Like, she did not care.
And she did.
Yeah.
She did sue her.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the people that they cleared, and that's how chapter 17 ends. So then chapter 18 is about Steve Gonsalves, and just that he had given a lot of news interviews. You can see them online. He's very outspoken. His family's very outspoken. So the author just talks about that, some of the things that the family has said. He described Kaylee as watching true crime, and so much that she knew about a missing woman in the area, and she was in a store and thought that she saw her and actually like called about it. So the author's painting the picture about how Steve's talking about his daughter, making that connection with the true crime community. Also talks about how Steve made sure that he had the ex-boyfriend come over shortly after and check him up and down to make sure that he was okay. And that leads into chapter 19.
Yeah, not that he was okay, that he didn't have any marks on him.
That's what I meant, that he was clear.
Yeah, that he was clear. And he actually took pictures of him. So he's like, you may need these. And after he felt satisfied that, he had nothing to do with it, they kind of hugged it out. But, chapter 18 is kind of a gloss over for me in the book, only because I know he's been, Steve has been out there the most, but he's wearing his emotions on his sleeve.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You said he's been back and forth, and I never want to be in that man's situation.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to sit back and comment on a person who's in dire grief.
Yes.
And just try to articulate, well, why did he say this and why did he do this? And, what the man did and what the man said.
He can do what he wants.
Do what he wants.
Yes.
I would never want to be in his position. And, I know he's been out there a lot, and he just wants to, he has to do whatever he needs to do for himself. And
yeah, absolutely.
Godspeed to him.
For sure. That does lead into the next chapter, though, because he found out that Kaylee was following a true crime person on TikTok, and the channel is Chronicles of Olivia, and Kaylee was following her during the Gabby Petito case. And so Steve reached out to her because they wanted to keep it fresh. They were afraid, I believe, that the case was going to go cold
Sure.
before they arrested somebody. So the interview with Chronicles of Olivia, the last I knew, it was on her channel on YouTube. So if it's still posted, you should be able to find it there. But they go and interview with her, and that's where he makes his famous quote, and the author puts it in here that we're coming for you.
Yeah.
And that's how that section ends.
Right. The hunter's game. Is that what that section was? What was that called again?
The hunter's story.
The hunter's story.
Every part is someone's story.
Yeah.
And the next part 4, will be the forensic scientist's story.
I'm looking forward to this one as well. But
yes,
the one we just covered, I think there was in the book pretty good, storytelling. I didn't follow the whole hunter thing, even though I understand why it was in there. But there were some nuggets in there that I think we pulled out. We were able to talk about. But it was the most interesting so far of the book in my eyes. And I actually am kind of engaged now to keep moving forward in this, because now we're in the crux of it, I think, where we are in this case. So I think now it's like we can really start talking about the things of the here and now. And
yes, because it's going to get into the investigation.
Yes.
So the forensic scientists, that part 4 is going to be all about the investigation. So we're going to cover part 4 on our next episode, and we want to give a big thank you to our viewers who heard our plea at the end of our last episode.
Oh, yes. I thought you were saying thank you for the comments, which have been awesome.
Oh, loved the comments.
Yeah, comments have been great. And we're actually, when we see a comment that's maybe contradictory to some of the things that we talked about, gives us a chance to go back and look at some of that stuff, or say,
oh yeah, we've gotten some great clarification.
Yeah.
People will correct us.
No, that's great.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
We don't say incorrect things on purpose.
No.
So,
and we also start, I think, every episode, like, hey, this is for entertainment purposes only. It's our speculation. We're doing our best to, bring this information as we hear it forward. But remember, we hear a lot of different things from a lot of different people, and everybody has a twist on it. So,
right.
We're parroting some things that have been, started, months ago, but we're doing our best to vet all that out.
Yes.
The other thing that we talked about, which I think you were going to,
I was starting to say thank you so much for people who have subscribed to our channel. We asked at the end of our last episode, and some of you really came through for us. So we really appreciate that, and we hope that you will come back and keep watching our videos. So
I think the first episode we made that plea. We said, hey, we need about 91 more subscribers to reach our goal of 500. So we put that out. The next episode, I think we're down to 86. This episode, we are at what?
I think we need 42 more.
42 more. So we're
42 more.
Almost halfway to that last little leg of the goal.
Yeah.
So again, keep subscribing if you haven't. Doesn't cost anything. It's free of charge.
Yep.
All you're going to do is get a notification when we put another episode up. You know, and if you want to join us, we'd love to have you. If you don't, you can ignore it. That's all it's going to cost you.
We want to hit that goal of 500.
We want to hit that goal of 500.
If you could help us, we appreciate it. And please join us back for our next episode, and we will see you then.
Bye.
Bye.